I think I would be, I guess in dereliction of duty as a member of Workers' World Party if I didn't talk about the origins of the Boston Bus Drivers Union. I'm only 25 years old. I've only been in the party a few years, but I've heard this story scores of times. And I think the reason we tell this story so much in the party is because it really encompasses our approach to the working class and the struggle, and how the struggle against racism is so key in the struggle against capitalism. Racist mobs were blowing up school buses and attacking school children and murdering people. And so our party mobilized, and we said we have to fight against racism because it is the most ugly enemy of the workers. And we went to Boston and in 1974 organized a march, a historic march against racism. The demand of the march was "Say no to racism," and that was plastered all over the city, and thousands of people converged on Boston for a historic march. Now, the Boston Globe, one of the capitalist press that greatly champions the overdogs of the world and speaks in the name of the rich and the powerful, has attacked some of the leaders of the Boston Bus Drivers Union and called them communists. And it's interesting because I can't think of a better word to describe these leaders of the Bus Drivers Union who are members of our party. You can talk about communism, it's this abstract thing, this future we're fighting for, but communism is also, if you look at communism the way Che Guevara meant it, the way Kim Il-sung meant it, it's a way of living your life, to fight against imperialism and fight against the system that oppresses people all over the world. And being a bus driver at the time when there were racist riots going on at that time was risking your life. The mobs were attacking people, but these comrades, they weren't afraid. They said, "Sign me up, and I want to help fight against racism in Boston." And that was a heroic action that took place. And after mobilizing against the racism, they also fought for a union, and they helped to unionize the Boston Bus Drivers Union. And that was a heroic effort. And the union, in our party's role in the union has been what we said unions should always be. Not just focusing on issues in the workplace and one individual workplace, but being centers of the entire class, centers of resistance. This is a union that's fought against police brutality, that's demonstrated against the wars. When the Occupy Boston events were happening, they had a tent there, the union did, that was there organizing with the youth. It had always been a union that fought for the entire working class, not just the narrow interests of one workplace against one particular employer. So now I'm going to talk about Veolia, this company that is attacking the Boston Bus Drivers Union. Veolia, it's changed its name numerous times. It's kind of funny. They talk about, the mafia businesses often change their name so many times. Well, Veolia is a global criminal corporation. They've changed their name numerous times. But if you look at Veolia Environmental, the huge conglomerate that makes up the Veolia Corporation, they can really trace their origins back to old money in the French ruling class. They were set up originally in 1853 when Louis Napoleon, also known as Napoleon III, decided to privatize the sewer systems of Paris in 1853. That's their origins. And it's powerful money in the French ruling class. And it's interesting because if you think about it, just 20 years later in 1871, when the workers of Paris rose up and they had the first workers' revolution at the Paris Commune, they were probably fighting against the capitalists who today own the Veolia Environmental Corporation. And that's something to think about. But around the world, there are 300,000 workers on 4 different continents: Africa, Asia, the Americas, and in Europe, who are exploited by the Veolia Corporation, whether it's through their quote-unquote environmental work, which is the control of water resources, or their transportation services. And from the labor of these 300,000 workers, in 2012 alone, they raked in $394 million worth of profits. That's profits they made from the labor of the 300,000 employees who work for Veolia around the world. Veolia has also been condemned by the forces that stand in solidarity with Palestine because Veolia is a huge ally of the Israeli regime. In fact, Veolia is so close to the Israeli regime in its settlements. It has these settlements where they go into Palestinian neighborhoods, kick everyone out, and set up settlements on Palestinian land. And Veolia has sponsored that. It's gone out of its way to support that. And the campaign to boycott, divest, and sanction against Israel, that campaign has targeted Veolia numerous times for their crimes. Veolia and its water services, it's caused many people to become ill. In Kentucky, workers have become ill from water. There are lawsuits. There have been all kinds of places all over the world where their malpractice and their handling of water has resulted in people becoming ill and suffering. And if you look at them, if you look at what they're doing, their attack on the Boston Bus Drivers Union, they hate all unions. They have a record as union busters. If you look wherever, especially in their transportation services, they're exploiting, they're busting unions, they hate unions, they're ruthless. Veolia is a super multinational corporation, and it's really the image of what capitalism has become in the modern period. I know a lot of people, a lot of people fall under the impression that, what we have now, it's not really capitalism. This is just crony capitalism. But capitalism is this pure system where people are competing. No, Veolia, huge multinationals that work with the banks, that have the governments on their side, that is what capitalism has become. It's what Lenin described in his book, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, where you have a few Western corporations that exploit the entire world and reap profits at the expense of the people of the world. One thing that Lenin pointed out about cartels like Veolia is that there's an unbreakable alliance between the government and the stock exchange. And the Israeli settler regime, the U.S. government, they team up. And whenever there are countries around the world that are fighting for independence from companies like Veolia that exploit them, that's when the tanks and the bombs and the drones go. Right? The gun follows the dollar, as a founder of our party called it. It's a world system of imperialism. Now, at the time our party was founded, Sam Marcy wrote a document. It was actually kind of a decade before it was founded. It was called The Global Class War and the Destiny of American Labor. And in it, he hinted at the fact that workers in the United States are fighting against huge corporations, but workers around the world are also fighting against them. And he said, the U.S. that there were people at the time this document was printing that argued that the U.S. working class was separate. And, it's this thing you hear about American exceptionalism. And workers in the U.S., they have their own problems to worry about. They're separate from the people of the world. But Sam Marcy wrote, he said, the U.S. working class is the link, and the global working class is the chain. And without the link and the chain, neither one exists. But there's a tie between workers in the United States who are fighting against corporations like Veolia, and a tie between the people of the world as they fight against them. That workers in the United States and workers all over the world have the same enemy. We're fighting the same system. When workers in Boston fight against union busting from Veolia, they are fighting against the global system of imperialism. When Palestinians fight against settlements set up by the Veolia Corporation, they are fighting against imperialism. On October 24th, when we're going to have a rally demanding the raising of the minimum wage, we're fighting against imperialism. And when the Maoists in India, the Naxalite rebels, are fighting against capitalism in India and fighting alongside the peasantry, they're fighting against imperialism. In Syria right now, as the people are rallying to fight these US-backed mercenaries who are attacking and murdering people, they're fighting against imperialism. We're the Workers' World Party. We're not the workers of the U.S. Party. We're the Workers' World Party because there's no independent destiny. There's no separate destiny for the working class. We're all together in a global struggle against imperialism, against the same bosses and capitalist corporations. So tomorrow is going to be a national day of action against the Veolia Corporation. In cities all across this country, people are going to be demonstrating against Veolia and what they're doing to the Boston bus drivers, what they're doing to the Palestinians, what they're doing with their poisoning of the water system. It's going to be a global day of action. And I just want to think back to 1871, the first workers' uprising, against some of the French capitalists who now exploit the entire world with imperialism. And, that was defeated. The Paris Commune was ultimately defeated, and the workers' uprising was put down. And when it was put down, a lot of the workers who participated in it were executed, and they were shot. And when they were lined up to face the firing squads, rather than cowering or acting in fear, they came up with a way to defy the people who were shooting them down. And they held their fists up in the air. And now today, that's a global communist salute. People are raising their fists up in the air, right? You notice the Black Panther Party, they raised their fists up in the air. The Chinese People's Liberation Army, they raised their fists up in the air. The Bolivarian revolutionaries in Latin America are raising their fists up in the air. It's a global salute. Originated in the fight in the Paris Commune, but spread all over the world because we're all workers and we are all in a struggle against the capitalist system. So Tomorrow there's going to be a demonstration against Veolia's local offices, which are located on 7th Avenue and 30th Street. It'll be at noon, and I hope so many people can be there. If we can be there to stand with our comrades in Boston, to stand also with our comrades in Palestine, to stand with the people in Kentucky who've had their water poisoned. Everywhere people are being attacked by this ruthless multinational working class. We need to stand together. We need to say, you won't poison our water. You won't kill Palestinians. You won't bust a great militant fighting union in Boston. We're going to stand against you, and we're going to raise our fists high up in the air. Power to the working class and fight imperialism. Stand together. Deirdre talked about Lenin and how Lenin's understanding of the national question was key to how the party behaved in Boston. And I actually wanted to touch on another aspect of Lenin and the trade union struggle, which was, at the time of the Russian Revolution in 1917, there were two big labor union federations in the United States. The big one, the huge one that most workers were in, was called the American Federation of Labor. And the AFL was a reformist union. They said no politics in the union. They were also very racist. Most of their unions had whites-only clauses. They were awful. And then there was the Wobblies, the Industrial Workers of the World, which were militant, the IWW, and they were anarchists, and they went out and they did all this militant stuff. And most of the leaders, the people who ended up founding the Communist Party in this country, came out of the Wobblies. And the Communist International, they had a gathering to discuss trade union policy, and Lenin urged the revolutionaries to go into the AFL. Even though the AFL was disgusting, because he said that's where the majority of the working class is. And they opposed what was called dual unionism. Some of these revolutionaries had this idea, we're going to set up our own unions that are going to be, totally communist and totally revolutionary. And Lenin said, you're not going to reach all the millions of workers who are in those reactionary unions. And even though the labor bureaucrats are disgusting and reformist, you have to go to the workers. You have to go into the unions and fight for a revolutionary policy. And the two leaders of the U.S. Communist Party who fought for that, James P. Cannon and William Z. Foster, they called the slogan, boring from within. You go to where the workers are and you fight for a revolutionary policy within the union. That was the Leninist understanding of how revolutionaries relate to the labor unions. And that's what Stephen Kirschbaum and the Steves and all the others have really effectively put into practice. They've been boring from within. They've been Leninists. They've been fighting to transform the unions from a narrow, single-issue workplace force into a force that can take down the entire capitalist system, and it's a good example. And so we're going to stand with them, and that's Leninism, that's Marxism, that's revolutionary ideology, and it's been put into practice in Boston. So I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you, comrades.